All right, hello and welcome to day 2 of the 2021 Better Buildings, Better Plants Summit. We're so glad to have you be here with us today. Next slide. You're in the right place if you are looking to learn more about the greatest hits from DOE's Waste Reduction Pilot. We've got some really wonderful speakers today in a rapid fire session. But before we get started, I do want to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. The first is that this session will be recorded and archived on the Better Buildings Solutions Center. So you'll be able to check out this recording in just a couple of weeks and also click on any links on the slides that you see during the session today. Additionally, you've probably noticed that you all are in listen-only mode, which means you can't unmute yourself. However, if you have any audio or visual issues or technology issues that we can help with while you're in the session, you can go ahead and chat us using the chat function in Zoom, which should be on the bottom right side of your screen. Next slide, please. I'll be your moderator today. My name is Hannah Debelius, and I'm a fellow in the Building Technologies Office in the Department of Energy. And I have the wonderful privilege of working with our Better Buildings program with our commercial real estate and higher education sector, and also in partnership with the Advanced Manufacturing Office for the Waste Reduction Pilot. Next slide, please. We have got an action-packed session for you all today. We're going to start with some program updates to let you know what the Waste Reduction Pilot has been up to in year 2 of this effort. And then we have 4 wonderful speakers. They're going to go through 4 different topic areas, each covering the things that we've been hearing about and the things that our partners are most interested in around waste reduction. We're going to also be engaging you all through some polls, that you can give us some feedback, and our speakers can learn a little bit more about who we've got in the audience today. And there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so you can also ask from our waste experts on the line. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we will be using an engagement platform today that's called Slido. So to access this platform, you're going to want to open either your mobile device or a new browser, and you're going to go to slido.com. Then you're going to enter the event code DOE. There's a little join button, so you'll join it. And then here's the important part, which is from the drop-down menu, you want to choose the name of our session, which is, again, greatest hits from the DOE Waste Reduction Pilot. So right now, again, you should open up either your mobile device or another browser. Go to slido.com with the event code DOE. You're going to join, and then choose our session from the dropdown, which is greatest hits from the DOE Waste Reduction Pilot. Excuse me, the DOE Waste Pilot. So with that, we're going to go ahead and launch our first poll. So I hope that, again, you're joining for this because this is where we can see more engagement. So we'll start out with an easy question for you, which is just, what sector are you from? All right, industrial manufacturing coming out strong. And commercial real estate, which is great, government, multifamily, higher ed. All right. Oh yeah, but we've got all these sectors represented, which is wonderful. K-12, no data centers out there? Come on, guys. All right, excellent. Well, this is actually pretty representative also of our waste pilot, and our speakers today are from different sectors, so I think that there will be something for everybody. We can go to the next poll, please, which is that we are wondering if your organization currently has a waste-focused goal. For the Waste Reduction Pilot for Better Buildings, it was a condition to join that they either join with a goal or set one while they're with us. So we are curious to know if attendees on the line today have any waste-focused goals. Okay, a lot of people don't, but they're considering one, which is wonderful. You've come to the right place, and we'll definitely have time to talk about data and reporting today, which I think will be really relevant to that. Diversion goals, that's definitely what we see as one of the most common goals, which is diversion is the percentage, either by weight or volume, of waste that does not go to a landfill usually. All right, great, and a couple of absolute reduction goals, which is interesting. Wonderful. We're going to move over to our last poll before I introduce you to our speakers then. And this poll is, what resources do you think will help you accelerate your waste reduction goals? And this is really helpful feedback for us as we continue our waste reduction pilot efforts and, continue to bring in waste and the waste energy nexus into better buildings. Okay, a life cycle assessment tool, waste profilers, more solutions and case studies. I'll also have time to highlight some of the things we've been up to that are some of these resources for you as well that we've created in the last year. Okay, and tracking guidance is coming to the top. All right, excellent. Thank you so much. That's interesting to hear that feedback, and I think we've got some resources that'll be of interest today. So if we could return to our slides, please. The first thing I'd like to do is just recognize and thank all of our waste reduction pilot participants. We've had many join us over this 2-year effort that we are currently in the 2nd year of in the industrial and commercial sector. These partners have come together to share resources and knowledge with one another, to give us feedback at DOE, and to really engage on waste reduction. So it's been a really robust effort, and I'm excited to tell you more about what we've been up to this year. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this all, of course, would not be possible without our waste pilot team. So I'd like to also recognize a couple of my other colleagues that are in the advanced manufacturing office, Bruce Lung, Eli Veen, Ethan Rogers, and then also our support from ICF and RETEC. If you have any questions about the waste pilot, in the future, you can reach out to all of these people. My email is going to be at the end of this session, and so you can always reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you with any of my colleagues on this. All right, next slide, please. One of the things that we've put together for this last year has been a new resources page. So on this page on the Better Building Solutions Center, you can access all of the resources and case studies that we've put together so far in this pilot. So that covers both commercial sector and industrial and manufacturing sectors, and all the resources we've been able to put together. I also encourage you, while you're on the Solutions Center, to check out the Better Buildings Progress Report for this year, where we also share some more resources and data from this year from our waste reduction pilot partners. Next slide. This year, we also were able to host a series of working groups on plastics, outreach and engagement, and data and measurement. All of those names of partners that have joined us that you saw a couple slides ago came together to really dig a little bit deeper on some of these. And again, you can find what came out of those on this Better Building Solutions Center. But we are also hoping to use some of the feedback that we get today through those Slido polling to assess what we want to do and if we want to have other working groups for this year and into next year. Next slide, please. We also were able to host a healthcare and pharmaceutical waste peer exchange based on some common interests and common challenges. We were able to bring this group together to really do a robust peer exchange to try to find solutions that could be available across sectors. And finally, speaking of solutions, next slide, please. We also were able to publish multiple solutions and case studies from our partners this year. From engagement to waste audits and multi-step processes and the hack the pack creative solutions from Steelcase that's up here. These case studies were brought to us with ideas from our partners, and we're able to publish those. So for all of you on your poll that just said that you are exploring this and maybe looking to set goals, this is a great place to start to learn more about what other people in your sector, or maybe even other sectors, are doing. So without further ado, I would like to then move forward and introduce our panelists. So we have, again, 4 wonderful panelists today who are all have been involved in the waste reduction pilot with Better Buildings, Better Plants. And I'll be reading their bios as we get through this first section where we'll each introduce your waste pilot program. So one more slide, please. Wonderful. So first up in this introduction, we will have Clare Lumkong, who is an experienced leader in building and leading sustainability programs with over 30 years in the field. She's been with Bristol-Myers Squibb for over 9 years and is currently the manager of sustainability on the corporate team. In this role, she focuses on employee engagement, supply chain, global engineering, and third-party audit to drive improved sustainability performance. So Claire, please share a little bit more about BMS.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for inviting BMS to speak on the green chemistry program. Green chemistry is not unique to BMS, but you will see how we've incorporated this key program in our green by design philosophy into our products. Next. So yes, first let me introduce BMS. We're a global biopharma company that develops oncology, hematology, cardiovascular, and immunology medicines to patients to help prevail over serious diseases. Next. And our researchers are committed to adhering to the 12 principles of green chemistry in our drug development and manufacturing processes. These principles incorporate safety, environmental impact, and efficiency into the program, and they're endorsed by the American Chemical Society, the Green Chemistry Institute, and BMS is actively involved in that. So I'll give you some more details on that in upcoming slides. But it does certainly embrace the drivers based on the 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit. So our R&D organization is committed to evaluating 90% of our new products in the new product portfolio using the green chemistry guidelines. And for BMS, that approach is distilled down into 4 main principles, which would be familiar in the waste field. It's reducing waste wherever possible, reusing materials wherever possible, maximizing the effective use of resources, and encouraging responsible use of the products. And we're happy to say that we exceeded the target by assessing 100% of our new products in our R&D portfolio between 2016 and 2020. Next. So very briefly, I'd like to show you how the design drug development. Through this greenest by design strategy, we've introduced several domains of new technology, which include continuous manufacturing and predictive data analytics. The result is the reduction of consumption of materials, energy, and water, while also saving time and increasing safety. So next I'll give you some more information about how we use predictive analytics on evaluating those processes. And I'll hand it back over to Jason McIntyre. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. We're looking forward to hearing more from you about BMS. The next for an introduction is Jason McIntyre, who's the Director of Real Estate Operations and Sustainability for USAA Real Estate. He joined the company in 2014 as a National Property Operations Manager, and now as a Sustainability Director is USAA Real Estate's internal sustainability subject matter expert, where he oversees sustainability initiatives from the asset level to the overall company level. So Jason, we're anxious to hear more about USAA.
Absolutely, thanks, and glad to be here. We've been involved with the DOE and the Better Buildings Challenge for quite some time, and excited to be part of the waste pilot. Next slide. So a little bit about USAA Real Estate. We are a commercial real estate investment manager and investor. We co-invest on our deals as well. Currently a portfolio over 20 billion in assets under management, with a national portfolio of office, multifamily, industrial, retail, and hotel assets. And our strategy around sustainability is longstanding. We're a 19-time Energy Star Partner of the Year, and we've been focused always on expense management, on resource management, and that dovetails very nicely with our sustainability strategy. Also, as an investor and fiduciary, it's important that our strategy makes business sense and contributes towards risk-adjusted returns for our investors. And, you know, managing our waste is certainly a way to do that. It's also a way to, you know, contribute and minimize the impacts that that our built assets have on our portfolio. Our portfolio waste goals really are pretty simple. They're 5% annual reduction or annual 5% diversion improvement, I guess is the best way to phrase it. And you might be thinking, well, after a certain number of years, how do you maintain that? Well, we have a churning portfolio. We're always acquiring, buying, and selling assets. And so, you know, we sometimes feel like our total diversion rate might hover right around the same area, but it's because we often are onboarding waste programs at new properties, also partnering with new tenants as they may have their own waste goals. So we actually added a secondary goal, which is applicable not only to waste, but other sustainability metrics, which is really a data coverage target, which is 100% target by 2030. So the reason why we make that, I mentioned that specific goal, is that capturing this data can often be difficult when you have multi-tenanted or, you know, triple net lease buildings. If your tenant manages their own waste streams, you really need to partner with them. And we do that through our lease language and just realizing that we're both aiming for many of the same goals. So look forward to sharing a little bit more about what we're doing at USAA Real Estate and what we've learned through the pilot.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jason. Next up, we have Breitner Marczewski, who's a senior sustainability engineer at General Motors. He supports the zero waste goal for the company. He holds a bachelor's degree in energy engineering from the University of ABC, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and a master's degree in engineering and technology management from Louisiana Tech University. Breitner, tell us more about General Motors.
Thank you, Hannah. Next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to for us to share our zero waste program. I guess I will start off saying that for those in the slide of one of the answers was defining or creating goals around zero waste. So I hope this helps you in your journey. For GM, zero waste means zero materials going to landfill, incinerators, and also energy recovery. It kind of aligns with the Zero Waste International Alliance definition for what zero waste means. In terms of our goal, GM aims to divert 90% of our waste from landfill incineration and energy recovery by 2025. Next slide, please. So here you can see more about the scope of our program. The main objective is to move waste upwards in the waste hierarchy. And in our scope, we include all kinds of waste: solid waste, liquid waste, hazardous waste. The only waste streams we exclude are construction demolition because those are considered event waste. But to qualify for the zero waste definition, a facility must divert 90% of their waste streams. The contamination level should be less than 5% per waste stream that goes to recycling centers. And they also need to engage in the cultural engagement for sustainability. So it involves leadership, employee participation, and innovation. On the right side, you see our waste hierarchy. And at the bottom, you can see landfill incineration as in the red color, and energy recovery, it's yellow because there's a lot that goes on in there. If you go to the next slide, please, you see that energy recovery is tricky. So this process is what we envision for our future operations. We want to be fully circular from GM facilities, from the engaging with suppliers, engaging with the dealerships, the users, and recycling centers. And more importantly, at the center of the circle, you see engagement upstream with our design team to reduce waste early in the processes. Next slide, please. So this one is just digging to some of our data, and I will get more deeper this in the second part of the presentation. But for GM today, if we eliminate foundry sand, the highest waste stream we have is plant non-hazardous trash. And there's a lot of waste stream that goes in that category. So anything that we can do internally in our processes to reduce the waste stream will contribute to their metrics to achieve the zero waste goal. Thank you. There we go.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Breichner. Those were interesting graphics. Next up, our final panelist today is Elizabeth Cole, who's currently a Recycling and Waste Reduction Program Coordinator with the City of Beaverton, Oregon. With over 12 years of experience in recycling and waste reduction outreach and education, she works on numerous projects from assisting Beaverton businesses with recycling and waste reduction to regional campaigns on food waste prevention, as well as collaborative projects to improve recycling at multifamily communities. So Elizabeth, please tell us more about the City of Beaverton.
Yes, good morning, and thanks for having me here. It's great to see all the panelists and the big crowd. Beaverton is located about 10 miles west. It's a little suburb of Portland, Oregon. It's kind of northwest corner of Oregon. And our population is right around 100,000 right now. For the waste pilot project, we decided to focus on our internal operations within the city. Our staff is around, I want to say 500 to 600. And we set a diversion goal of 60%, a total waste diversion goal of 60%. And our goal was to really kind of engage our staff and to come up with some creative employee engagement and education opportunities around that diversion. And then kind of test it out at our City Hall building and then expand to our other, buildings and operations, that sort of thing. And I will get into a lot more detail later about our goals and what we ended up doing this year and kind of some challenges that COVID gave to us. So that's it for my interest. Next slide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Well, now that we have you've learned a little bit more about who our speakers are that we have on the phone today, we want to do a couple more polls to get your thoughts about some of the things that we'll be talking about for the rest of this session. So this next poll is, in 1 to 2 words, what tools or programs are you using to measure waste and track data? So from our poll earlier, I know that a lot of you are already either measuring data or maybe working towards a goal. So what tools are you using? All right, Excel, not surprising. I think that's our go-to. The WARM model, we know that's from the EPA, and actually we'll be hosting them in our summer series later. Invoices, I think that, monthly invoices from waste haulers, we definitely know is a common one. Energy Star, a big shout out for Excel here. Okay, so a lot of different tools and hauler records. We know that data can be one of the largest challenges to get data and then make sure that data is accurate. So interesting to know all these tools that you are using. All right, and again, to participate in these polls, you go to slido.com, enter the event code DOE, and then you choose our session title, which is Greatest Hits from the DOE Waste Pilot. You can also click the direct link that's in the chat box, and then you won't have to put in the event code. All right, thank you. I think we're going to go ahead and launch the next poll here, which is, what metrics do you use to report internally or externally related to waste? Okay, diversion coming out on top. That's, as I've mentioned, that's definitely the most common goal that the partners in the waste pilot have been pursuing. And it's, whether that's by weight or volume, diversion rate is definitely a very popular metric. Doing reduction, and maybe that's total reduction, makes a lot of sense. And energy recovery, we know in particular our manufacturing partners have been exploring energy recovery, and I think that's something that we'll also continue to explore in the pilot. And a couple of people also are including waste as part of their Scope 3 emissions for, that is Scope 3 carbon emissions reporting, which is interesting. All right, but not surprisingly, diversion remains on top. All right, I think we'll move to our last poll before the next section then. This question is, what methods have been successful in your outreach and engagement programs? And this is an open answer, and we just want to know what you all have been doing to engage either employees or customers or residents, you know, whoever it is that is the recipient of your waste efforts. What have you been doing for engagement? Sustainability scorecards. Okay, that's interesting. And visual aids. We definitely have talked a lot about signage, and we have some engagement and signage solutions that have come out of our discussions with pilot participants this year. Environmental Month types of campaigns, which makes sense. You know, we of course see a lot around Earth Day, and the EPA also hosts National Recycling Day in November. Videos of landfills, tours to facilities. We've also had a couple of partners that have done videos and integrated that into staff training and HR practices. E-waste events. That's great. Using social media, that makes sense, especially if you're reaching a customer base. Okay, excellent. Well, I'm glad to see that we have engagement in all three of these topics, because these three topics are the next ones that we're going to be tackling. So we're about to go into kind of a rapid fire, you know, round robin type structure with the next part of our session here, where each of our 4 panelists will be weighing in a little bit deeper on 3 topics. So this first one we know is the thing that rises to the top as a challenge for a lot of our partners and a lot of the Better Buildings, Better Plants network that we've spoken with. And it's getting data and making sure that data is accurate. So with that, I will turn it over to Claire to kick us off to dive a little bit deeper into data and management.
Thank you. So we're talking about green chemistry, right, and data management. So in the previous slide, we saw that it's important to utilize green by design early in that chemical synthesis development process. So let's take a look at how the greenness score is calculated. And the KPI that we use is process mass intensity, or PMI. That's the key metric, or the green yardstick, as the ACS refers to it, that drives more sustainable processes. So the PMI is defined as a total mass of materials used to produce a specified mass of materials, or in our case, it's active pharmaceutical ingredient, or API. So you can see the ranking criteria involved for each ingredient in the process that incorporates safety, environment, you know, the hazard of the ingredients. Here we're going back to that people, planet, profit, as well as the efficiency and the waste streams that are generated as part of the process. So you can see it's all of this criteria is a rather complex calculation. And what I'll show you next is the predictive analytic tool that takes all of this complex information and helps facilitate in decision making. Next.
So I'll tackle the waste data and measurement. You know, most of our commercial buildings have a pretty traditional set of waste streams. You know, obviously landfill, recycling often is mixed or commingled. Then some specialty waste streams. I think also based on tenant demand and tenant, some regional preferences. There might be composting, or there might be segregated recycling. I think the biggest thing that we've, have to realize is waste streams, a lot of it's being isolated or siloed based on tenant design and preference. And especially in different lease structures, whether they do their own, paper used to be a building kind of waste stream. And most of the time paper, if people are still printing a lot, assuming they're in the office, that they are doing their own shredding. And so that waste stream is still occurring, but it's often private or on a separate contract than the building. So, I'll touch on data coverage in a moment. Also the question that's come up about, how do we capture this data from our tenants? Other waste streams might be e-waste. Again, a lot of that is private, where the tenant really wants to oversee how their e-waste is handled. We have certainly done those type of events. I show here on the picture, this is someone I saw posted up on the Slido, dumpster diving. We do conduct waste stream audits on occasion. This is really to help us understand the data quality. What's the accuracy of our reporting? And I don't think it's much of a secret that waste data is not real sophisticated, right? We often think about how large is the container and how frequent is it being picked up. I think it's improving, certainly where you're paying unique fees based on volume or weights. It's getting more accurate, but we're seeing technologies available where we meter, dumpsters and getting much more accurate, data. And so, when we talk about data and measurement around waste, it's important to think about the quality of that data. How reliable is it? When I see a building with the same waste data for 2 years in a row, we know that is probably because it's being estimated based on frequency and capacity. So that's a challenge, but an opportunity as well. The last thing I'll share here, and I touched on it briefly earlier, was the data coverage. So, capturing these tenant waste streams is a challenge. It's also a great engagement opportunity, which is one of our sections. We'll touch on in a little bit, but what might be perceived as a challenge or at odds with a tenant request could actually be a really strong opportunity for engagement and to partner with your tenant, share with them what you're doing, what technologies or what options they might have. I put joint ventures. We're also a limited partner in a lot of our investment deals. So, we're an equity investor, but we may not be operating the asset. And so capturing data from properties where we have limited visibility is also a challenge. And so as we look at requesting not just waste, but maybe energy or other data metrics, we're trying to incorporate the right language into those engagements so that the request is kind of automated, it's expected, and we capture a better picture of the waste. So that's it for now.
So for GM, this is what our data collection system can capture. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. So yes, so we know where the waste is being generated. We have data ID for each waste streams. We can define whether the waste is hazardous or non-hazardous. We can categorize the waste in primary categories such as plastics, and then we can subcategorize in what kind of plastics are you referring to. Management method refers to what happens to the waste stream once it leaves our site. It either goes to recycling or it can go to landfill. So you want to capture that. The exemptions, what waste streams are exempt. In our case, it's construction, demolition, and remediation waste. And the data comes in a monthly format with totals at the end. So this way you can kind of track seasonality on your numbers and find opportunities for diversion. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a step-by-step we had to go through in defining our baseline, and this will greatly help you when you think about creating your waste diversion program. The first thing, it seems obvious, but what is waste for your company? How do you define that? In our case, is anything that leaves the GM facility that is not saleable. So only, the vehicle itself, it's a product, it's not a waste. And how you wanted to report, for example, reuse. Do you have systems in place that can track the same waste stream being reused elsewhere? And then you want to define whether you want to have a baseline from an intensity perspective, kilogram per unit, or absolute intensity. It's very easy to explain in a manufacturing layout because they think about kilogram per unit, but it absolutely resonates better with people reading your sustainability report, because it clearly shows whether you're going up or going down in your waste generation. You also want to define, do you want to use average of past years or one single year? There are pros and cons with both approaches. And the policies you want to establish to create your baseline. You want to strictly follow the GHG protocol or your internal policies. This is an equation we use to calculate the diversion rate. And again, what is non-diverted for us is anything that goes to landfill in thermal processing. Next slide, please. Pros and cons, very quickly. The pro is that this equation actually tracks the performance over time, but it's hard on the con side because you're eliminating incineration waste to energy as a mean to divert your waste streams. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes, a little bit about our data and measurement. I'm kind of going over some results that we got. So we kicked off our pilot with kind of a baseline waste audit in January of 2020 and measuring, that waste from the previous week or so. We measured our curbside accepted material, which for within Beaverton is obviously garbage. We have a mixed recycling. Glass is collected separate for recycling, and then we also collect food scraps at our City Hall building. In addition to that, we have a few other programs to collect additional waste, which included batteries, fluorescent bulbs, and then electronics, computers, that sort of thing. So those we manage outside of that kind of curbside program that the hauler collects outside, and then those additional materials. So we looked at all of that. We did a waste sort. Several of us dug into that pile. You can see that was beforehand, and spent the day going through garbage. It's a lot of fun if you've never done one. Fun. And we found that about 31% of the landfill waste that was going to go to the landfill could have been diverted through either the existing curbside programs or one of those additional programs that we already had identified. So either the batteries or electronics, etc. And then there were a few reuse items, which were sort of anomalies. I won't get into a ton of detail about those, but basically identified 31%, which was kind of our target that, we already had programs for these and really wanted to target how we could get those out of our waste stream, that, additional percent. And next slide.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. As I mentioned, data has just been a really big challenge and a big topic of conversation over the last year and a half of the waste pilot. So I appreciate you all sharing more from your different perspectives there. I'll also mention to our attendees that we're also taking questions throughout the session utilizing Slido. So you can put in questions there, or if you see a question that you like and would like us to answer it at the end of the session, you can also hit the thumbs up, and that will increase its votes and it moves to the top. So then it's more likely that we'll prioritize that when we get to Q&A at the end. So again, you can put in questions anytime to either an individual panelist or the whole group, and we'll get to that at the end. So, of course, alongside with data and measurement, hand in hand goes tools and reporting, whether it's reporting internally with your organization or through a sustainability report, or if you report to a larger entity, or I know I just heard Bryce mention the greenhouse gas protocol. We want to know more about it. So that'll be our next topic for our round robin here. And so I will hand it over again to Claire.
Thank you. So just as a reminder, in the last slide, we looked at the criteria that went into the greenest score of materials that are incorporated in that process mass intensity calculation. And this is a snapshot of the web-based tool that we have and the output of that PMI Predictor. So the PMI Predictor is a web-based tool, as I mentioned. It calculates and predicts the potential route and outcomes for small molecule reactions. And it's a powerful tool that is utilized tremendously by the team. On the right, you can see the dashboard output for one of our drugs when it was in the development process. and you can appreciate the complex processes and calculations that are represented in those simple KPI, red, yellow, green, and how useful that can be for providing data to researchers who are in that chemical synthesis development program, and how to make good sustainability decisions for the processes as we go through the early stages of the development. Jason, let me hand it to you.
Yeah, thank you. So as to speak to tools and reporting, I'm showing an example here. Most of our waste hauling efforts are, outsourced through vendors that come to the building and pick up. We do certainly rely on the data capture from those waste haulers. But I have an example here. This may seem a little boring to folks, but this is essentially an analysis. Really, it's an economic analysis more than a recycling or waste diversion analysis, where we look at a waste hauling program at one of our buildings. Service cost, for example, $1,200 a month. We're working with a service provider that's actually doing kind of a contract review and analysis. Are we getting the right service, the right rate, the right tier? And just through a program like this, we're finding a savings of $592 a month. And so this is a great expense tool, but I share this because we're using this actually to help fund some of our waste diversion efforts. So one of the questions I saw, jumping the gun, Hannah, was, how do you fund these programs, or do you have to have an ROI? Well, we are a fiduciary for our real estate. Obviously, we want to do the best and reduce our environmental impact, but we're finding ways that we can actually push a program, maybe do an annual waste audit, do some tenant engagement, and pay for some of these services or extra costs through finding savings. And we can code this type of additional engagement to the same GL, the same line item on a expense report to our tenants. And so it's still a net savings solution. And I think it's a really interesting way to use an expense management tool to really drive diversion improvement and sustainability performance. Next slide. Here, just kind of talk a little bit about reporting. We do an annual sustainability report. We report properties at a property level, certainly for things like certifications, tenant engagement. A lot of tenants may have a green team, or there's inevitably a handful, probably most of the folks on this call, handful of people in our buildings that are really passionate about waste. And so they'll come to the property manager and say, hey, I'm seeing like a lot of recycling contamination. What can we do to help? And they kind of drive it from inside. That's really, helpful. We do roll up our performance into fund and portfolio property types. Some of you may or may not be familiar, but GRES, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, is a ESG assessment for property and fund managers to evaluate the sustainability, but also the social and governance components of their portfolios where they invest, and waste performance is part of that. And, as a company, we certainly also focus on it, and we disclose. I just did a quick screenshot from our last sustainability report. This is our office portfolio waste diversion, and it's an ongoing effort to always improve that. Brittany?
All right, thank you, Jason. For GM, in terms of tools and reporting, the things that you want to look at is, again, defining your zero waste strategy, what circularity means for your company. You want to look at your data and assess the gap. That will give you a good information how to assign targets. Communications, training, and engagement is really critical for your success. And then you want to integrate your waste reduction projects into your business plan. That's how it's going to get measured. That's how it's going to get tracked. And if you want to tie that into compensation for plant managers and others, that will really drive participation in your waste program. For implementation tools, you can use benchmarks against your different facilities, or even other, I would say, other OEMs when we compare their waste performance through their sustainability report, which is public. The meter data and dashboards, if you do have systems in place that can track your waste diversion. You want to promote continuous improvement in your operations, and you wanted to define the budget to, like I saw questions about funding opportunities. You definitely want to separate aside some funds to implement some recycling activities. And sometimes those recycling activities can be really hard, to be honest with you, because some waste are tied to commodity prices, and if oil prices go down, normally the price of plastic go down, and it makes more hard to accomplish to make sense of your business case. So you most likely won't have a good ROI. And then the recognition piece is really important. If you see people doing the right things that can help your program, we want to recognize them. You see that GM participates in the EPA WasteWise program. It's good to keep track of how you're performing over time. And then your program should be based on a PDCA cycle where you plan, develop, and then you continuous improvement, and then you assess your program at the end to correct any errors. Next slide, please. And these are some of the reporting frameworks we disclose our data. The first one is the CDP. GM has been reporting to the CDP for more than 7 years. The last report we score the high scores for climate change, A, and same thing for water. We are also disclosing our data with the EPA WasteWise. GM is the only OEM in North America to be listed in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. In other reporting frameworks, we use the SASB, GRI, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So those are tools you can use, take with you, read their guidelines. EPA, it's free to participate. The GR, that are very good information that can help you creating your zero waste program. I'll pass the ball to Elizabeth now. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you. On this section, I kind of want to talk a little bit about why and what for tools and reporting, and then a challenge that we had obviously with COVID, but our why kind of really drives what we do. And we have several. I've listed a couple on the slide, but we have our Beaverton Climate Action Plan with a really high level goal that kind of drives our work. We also have our Oregon Department of Environmental Quality has, I posted their vision here, but they have a lot of goals and their vision and et cetera that also drive kind of what we do in our program and why we're looking at waste reduction and diversion. So as I mentioned earlier, for this project, we did look at our landfill diversion and wanted to look at a total waste generation and reduction there and identifying kind of some new opportunities. A big challenge we ran into was COVID. As I'd mentioned, we were looking at our city hall building as kind of this pilot, really to look at that engagement, employee education, and what we could do that would kind of increase that enthusiasm and engagement, to reduce waste and divert correctly, basically. And COVID was really a big hit for us on this program because shortly after we did our initial baseline in January of 2020, March hit and everybody kind of went and work from home. So we didn't do a follow-up waste sort, which we had planned to do in January of 2020. So we had a year of data and education and outreach. And we decided to not do that because we just didn't think that the data would really be reflective and equal of each other, because considering in January of 2020 we maybe had 50% of staff in the office, so we would have had really great waste reduction numbers. It would have looked wonderful, but not in apples to apples comparison. So we kind of opted to do that. back out from that a little bit. And in the next section, I'll talk a little bit about what we did do that year, kind of redirected some of our energy, but, and I'm happy to get into more details, but on the what and why and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about why. I think everybody else in the panelists really gave you some great tools, but I just think having those driving or supportive goals and kind of your mission is really important to help you kind of keep moving forward with your waste reduction goals. So next slide.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, I'm glad you, of course, mentioned the, I don't know, year-long elephant in the room of COVID, because of course, you know, we've seen disruptions and changes in patterns, and you know, I think we all know that it's really just shifted where our waste is coming from. And, you know, with commercial real estate, we've seen maybe a little bit less, but more in our multifamily partners because people are working from home and that sort of thing, and the need for disposables and what that means for healthcare. So a ton of implications, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And if attendees have more questions about that or want to hear from folks, I encourage you to, again, put that in the Q&A and Slido. I do see that we have a couple of questions on the Zoom chat. So just a reminder that we'll be using Slido for the Q&A at the end. So if you put your question in there, you can copy and paste it over to Slido, either by choosing greatest hits from DOE Waste Reduction Pilot in the dropdown, or you can follow the link directly and you don't need the event code of DOE. So with that, we are going to be moving forward to our last, you know, rapid fire round robin topic here, which is engagement and outreach. So even if you know, have a baseline and know your data and all of that, you still probably want to improve it. And that means that you need to speak to your staff or employees or customers or residents or whoever it may be. So looking forward to hearing more from our panelists on this topic. We'll start again with Clare.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly outreach, both internal and externally, is absolutely critical. And, you know, Breitner mentioned that the continuous improvement mindset, and of course, that applies here in the green chemistry area as well. So, you know, how do we sharpen that tool? Internally, we have training and tools. We hold, I say we, the R&D organization, of course, holds an annual symposium, and it's widely attended. It's focused on sustainability, and it includes cutting-edge technology updates, as well as trending topics, internal advances in the area, and there are also internal annual and quarterly awards for new sustainable process development. This is in additional to internal training, you know, the tools, meeting updates of new information from the PMI Predictor. So internally, there's quite a robust communication program. And then externally, a number of our sustainability team members are also on the American Chemistry Society, the Green Chemical Institute Pharmaceutical Roundtable, and frequently contribute either with speaking or for publications in scientific journals, such as you know, Green Chemistry or Nature and Sustainability, or even Organic Process Research and Development. There is such a publication, which is widely read. So BMS continues to actively learn, improve the technology, share the knowledge, both internally and externally. And I hope that this program overview has been useful to share some insights into this ultimately waste reduction space. Jason, I'll hand it over to you.
Excellent. So on this, as it relates to outreach and engagement, you know, really our client is our tenants and our residents in our buildings. And so the way we engage with them around waste is certainly collaborative. We want to understand what their waste needs and demands are. And there's, I put here, you know, landlord-tenant synergies. As a landlord and owner, we're, you know, excited and want to report and communicate our waste progress. And we've found that our tenants have that same goal. In fact, many of them have their own diversion strategies and programs. They have stakeholders that they're expected to report on. And so really there's a synergy there where we can partner. And I put, real estate partner of choice because we have, a lot of large tenants across our portfolio, S&P 500 companies that, have multiple spaces with us. And, the more that we can be that real estate partner of choice, the more engaging and better value we deliver. I put this graphic to show, some of our waste metrics as the year of 2020 has dropped off. So ironically, though, some of it has stayed the same, right? We still have the trucks coming at the same frequency, and it's identified some opportunities where in most of our commercial space, I would say at least office, occupancy has been very, very low. Retail in some cases low, maybe not our grocery anchors or some of those things, but outreach and engagement, we've done case studies. Of course, we've done the tenant events, Earth Day events, e-waste events. And I think just the more that you plug in and understand your tenant and understand what their goals are, you'll realize there's synergies and opportunities to partner together and get a mutually beneficial outcome.
Thank you, Jason. So for General Motors, in the sustainability team, our client is the manufacturing and non-manufacturing employees. And here's one case of how we engage with them. This is for the Earth Day, April 22nd. And we partner with one of our suppliers, Battery Solutions, to have this webinar going on where people could join. And now we have a program in our tech center where employees can bring batteries from home and we will be recycling them on their behalf. So this is for all facilities in Michigan, and we plan to expand this to all the United States. Next slide, please. Now from a global view, the square box here on the side, it shows all of the outreach activities that GM supported last year. So more than 15,000 employees participating in outreach activities. We touched 21 states in 10 different countries. GM, I guess those activities generated $1 million worth in value for 300 nonprofits. And also the volunteer hours surpasses 100,000 hours for the year. And the little chart below the bar chart, there's a little dip, most likely because of COVID and maintaining social distancing was a struggle to have this outreach happening throughout the year. Otherwise, this number would have been following the trend up. On the left side, you see the program GM sponsors with the NWF, the National Wildlife Program. It's a program where we partner with schools across the United States, closer to our manufacturing sites, and kids can go to local, in this case, a river stream to analyze the health of the water, do some science experiments, and this is a way to create the sustainability leaders of the future. This is another thing that our group is involved with. And on the bottom right, you see that GM is proudly a member of the America Recycles Day. So we signed up the pledge last year, and we are engaging with them in 3 different groups to improve data, to improve secondary markets, and also to improve our own process as well. So those are the 3 main things that we do to engage with our employees and community where we work and live. And I'll pass to Elizabeth now.
Great, thank you. So engagement and outreach, this is where we spend most of our time in my line of work. And we spent a large portion of last year working on a regional, so our kind of area around the Portland metropolitan area is 3 counties, I think it's like 25 cities, and several of the jurisdictions all kind of work together often, and we work together on this project to really update our signage and really focus on outdoor signage. So what actually goes on, stickers for the big containers that are outside that waste goes into, as well as some signage for inside like shoot rooms or enclosure spaces, whether they're outside or inside. So we kind of took a step back from engagement with our employees, given everybody was in different places and, not sitting at the office necessarily, and decided to really look at this. Our signage hadn't been updated in, I don't know, a decade or more. It was very old. And while the materials accepted hadn't changed, things have changed and they needed improvement. So we kind of spent a lot of time on that. Metro, which is our regional government, led this project, and we, as a local city, participated. And we had several stakeholders were involved. So as I mentioned, our regional government, we had our local, city and county governments. We involved our hauling community. So our waste haulers were involved. And then we engaged several community-based organizations to really help with kind of transcreation of our materials and the languages that, we put on the signage. And then in ideal world, we were going to do focus groups in person and get feedback on a set of 3 designs that we came up with, and due to COVID, we decided to not have an in-person focus group. Well, we couldn't, and so we actually mailed packets. So that's where the community-based organizations really came in. They helped us identify some engaged individuals, and we mailed packets of sample materials to them, asked for their feedback, and then incorporated that. The pictures you see here are just a couple images of what our final product was. We created, traditionally, we had just a 10 by 10 or an 8 by 8 that would go on the really large, containers outside. So we've made a much larger decal. I believe it's 24 inches wide now, so much larger, so easier to see from, further back. They act as both a wayfinding tool and as, what goes in the bin kind of tool. So like I said, these are just 2 images. There's a big suite of materials. We did create the solutions at a glance, which I believe if you just search for the title, you'll be able to find. And I'm sure we could plug a link in somewhere. But that has our playbook, which has all of the materials that we created, all the different sizes of decals. There's indoor posters, outdoor signage, as well as kind of how we got there, and a lot of details around how we engaged and who we engaged with to use that. So these are going to start being rolled out this summer in the region, and we're going to start with our multifamily community, but then it'll come into our commercial, including our city hall, looping back into that engagement with staff. Eventually, when we get back to the office, we'll have new refreshed look of stuff. So I think that's it. Next slide.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. And I will say that we, on our resources slide at the end of the session, we do link your case study as well as other ones we've mentioned today. So thanks for plugging your own solution at a glance. And in the recording and slides, our attendees will have access to that link. Wonderful. Well, before we get into Q&A, we do have one more poll for you all, but I'd like to thank all of our panelists so far for sharing on all those topics. We've had a really robust Q&A, so I'm excited to get into that. But if we could launch the next poll, please. This will be the final poll for the session. And again, you can answer that in Slido. You all know the drill now. The passcode is DOE, and you drop down to greatest hits for the DOE Waste Reduction Pilot. The question is, with 1 being most difficult to overcome and 5 being the easiest to overcome, rank the following barrier categories for your waste reduction or diversion program. Cost. Okay, so cost seems to be one of the biggest barriers, which is interesting. And I know that in the Q&A, we've got a couple of questions around cost, so we'll definitely have time to dig into that a little bit more. Organization or management and culture. That is interesting that that's coming to the top. Maybe we can have our panelists speak to that a little bit more, of how you got buy-in internally. And also availability of technologies. I know that we've mentioned a couple of technologies today, but we can also dig a little bit deeper into that in the Q&A. All right, so it looks like cost and internal buy-in are kind of the top challenges here, which is interesting. All right, great. Well, thank you so much to our attendees for interacting with us on Slido for all of those polls. I think it helps our participants understand a little bit more about who's in line with us. With that said, I think we're going to switch over to our Q&A. We've got about 20 minutes for that. It's not too late to add a question into Slido for Q&A. And again, you can also click on the thumbs up to vote for the questions that you think are most interesting, and we'll pretty much go in order for that. So our first question was pretty popular on this, Jason, so people are very interested. But the question is, can Jason share how he's implemented waste goals into his multi-tenant buildings lease agreements?
Yeah, so I'll touch on that. As we've looked at incorporating green lease language into our leases, it's primarily around data sharing. You know, obviously the first step in a performance improvement program is to capture data and get the coverage. And that's why, you know, I shared too, with one of our goals really being better, more complete and full picture data. We've gone through that approach to expect our tenants to provide these type of data streams, including energy, but also waste, so that we can provide that transparency to our investors. So I think, you know, without, I guess, I don't know that I can, in this form at least, share the specific languages, not because it's confidential or anything. I think there's great resources available. I know we've used the BOMA Green Lease Guide, and there's other resources likely at the DOE, is, you know, incorporating this data transfer piece. I think last thing I'll say on this is, when you're trying to capture data from tenants, I think there's really two main things you're trying to overcome. One, which is the right or authority to ask for the data. And it's not that our tenants are saying, you know, no, we won't give you data. It's just, is there a mechanism? And are they already authorized to give it? And then the second piece is the kind of administrative piece. How do you actually get the data? Where does it go? Is it easy? Are you collecting bills, or is it, you know, an Excel spreadsheet? So as you think about your tenant data capture process, think about it, at least what we found is think about it from an approach of the right or authority to ask for the data, again, from tenants or joint ventures, and then how are you going to actually capture the data and report it? So that's been how we've tackled that approach. And we've started obviously with more of the gross lease, where we manage the stream, and then they may have isolated waste streams like batteries or paper. But then as you go to the other end of that spectrum of lease terms, would be like a triple net lease, where the tenant handles everything. And so we've had success through that path.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jason. And I will put in a shameless plug for another session here at the Better Building Summit that tackles green leasing, which is that we have a special event on Thursday at 12:45 Eastern, where we're going to hear from some Better Buildings partners about green leasing specifically. So we can also learn more then. The next question is, how do you evaluate and track waste reduction and reuse numbers, such as reusing fluids in a closed loop system, reusing packaging or utensils, right sizing products? This sounds a little bit more manufacturing focused. So maybe Breitner, would you like to kick us off on this?
Sure. Yes, excellent question. We go through the same hurdle collecting this type of data. I would say in the end, if you collected your data on a monthly basis, and if you're not promoting results, reusing, what's going to happen is your waste numbers will be very large, right? So let's say you have a process, you generate 100 units of waste. However, if you cut that on a monthly basis through reusing opportunities in half, you will see the reductions in your waste numbers. So it kind of goes both ways. The person mentioned every cycle. I don't think that's a good way to measure circularity, you can do a mass balance using what the Ellen MacArthur Foundation put together, so you can track circularity within your processes. It's actually something some reporting frameworks are requesting from companies. So it is not an easy task. And your example with fluids, it happens in one of our facilities. We do have reuse opportunities. And in our units of time, we use a monthly data. So anything that we can reuse within the month will be categorized as reuse. And once the material cannot be further reused, then becomes a waste, and then you manage that differently. Either goes to landfill or energy processing facility if it cannot be recycled.
Thanks so much, Breichner. Would anyone else like to weigh in on that? Okay, then I'll move on to our next question here, which is waste to energy displaces thermal processing energy and electric energy. Waste to energy in zero waste goal. If there's waste to energy in zero waste goals, how are the sustainability concerns of primary energy addressed? Any of our panelists like to chime in on that?
Yes, I think we talk a lot about waste to energy, and it's just a trend we see in the sustainability realm. Things a lot of companies are seeing to be moved away from thermal processing. I call them thermal processing because it includes incineration with and without energy recovery. There are some instances where when you do a life cycle analysis on incinerating specific waste streams, and a good example would be paint sludge for GM, it can actually have a positive CO2 savings associated to that instead of landfilling the material. So it comes down, I would say for the zero waste program of the future, comes down if you can unify everything into CO2 metrics, right? If everything is under the space unit, then you can run your life cycle analysis and determine whether it makes sense to send materials to a landfill or energy recovery, or even a distance recycling center. Sometimes the CO2 that the transportation costs will emit moving this material from point A to point B is larger than landfilling the material. Excellent question again. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Breichner. And I actually think we're going to keep you in the hot seat, pun intended, for our next question, which is directed to you, which is, could Breichner share an example of diverting from waste to energy or energy recovery for a specific waste?
Yes, as I mentioned, paint sludge is the easiest example I can think of because it's a very large waste stream we have at GM. And unfortunately, you can dry the sludge as much as you can to reduce its mass. But the main, I guess the end of life is the thermal processing facilities or landfill if there are no thermal processing facilities nearby. Another waste stream that is very common is wood pallets, especially if your supplier is overseas. There is this case where we import parts in plywood, and plywood unfortunately comes with formaldehyde, which is a chemical element where you cannot shred your wood pallets and make mulch out of it. So when your pallet is either with that type of material or composite with other cardboard materials, it's really hard to segregate. So although it's cheaper upfront, it will cost you more to dispose that waste stream if you had purchased a pallet made of natural wood, so you could shred here and reuse elsewhere. Good question, thank you.
Great, thanks so much for that specific example. So the next two questions we have on our list here, I think are actually a little bit related. So I think I'll start with Elizabeth, since that first one's directed to her, but then I'll have all our panelists touch a little bit on this question about costs and funding and return on investment. So Elizabeth, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, great question.
And sorry, I'll read the question out loud. Sorry
okay.
for those, but just Elizabeth speak about the economics of Beaverton's recycle program. How much does it cost? How much is recovered? Is there a net cost or benefit in hard money dollars?
Yeah, great question. So our waste recovery is measured as a waste shed. So Beaverton specific numbers I don't have, but we make assumptions based on the waste shed numbers. So our waste shed includes our tri-county region that includes Metro. Metro region includes Portland, and then the 3 counties within that and all the cities. Our Department of Environmental Quality does those waste audits. And I can share a link to those if somebody wants to dive into those. They're very detailed. Right now for our waste shed, the diversion rate is at just under 50%. For the region, the state's slightly lower than that statewide. The cost question's a good one. So within Beaverton, our cost structure is set up as basically a pay as you throw. What individuals, companies, pay is based on their garbage size, and then we've bundled the recycling and food scrap collection into that. And so in a sense, garbage sort of subsidizes, depending on the market, the other lines of collection. And for probably the past couple of years, since China really closed doors on receiving material, recycling has been a cost. That wasn't traditionally, always the case. Our, recycling was, haulers were making money on the, recycling material, and our recycling sorting facilities were, but yeah, for the past couple of years, recycling has been at a cost. And it's, basically supplemented by our garbage collection. We internally for the city do annual reviews. We have a franchise system with our haulers citywide. We have 5 haulers, and that we complete a review of costs annually and then adjust our rates as needed. So those go up occasionally as needed to kind of adjust for any increased cost to the system. And as far as the net cost or benefit question in hard dollars, I don't know the answer to that one. I could dig around and see if I could find one, but I'm going to guess our Department of Environmental Quality might have an answer. And but off the top of my head, I definitely don't know that one.
All right, thanks so much, Elizabeth. So if we could highlight the next question, I'm going to give our other panelists the option if they'd like to weigh in, which is, do you have funding for waste program efforts, or do waste solutions have to have a return on investment?
I can take this one off.
Great.
I talked a little bit about one of our strategies or tools that we're kind of piloting right now, which is looking at our hauling contracts, looking for waste, no pun intended, contract waste or contract overages where we're paying more than we should. And so by securing better rates and right sizing our service delivery and watching those contracts, we're identifying savings, which we're using towards these initiatives. I think for us to, waste is an expense to the property regardless of landfill or recycling. And so we're looking to, certainly improve the diversion rate, but also, a lot of this is intangible goodwill that we're, partnering with tenants, and it's the engagement with the tenant and, some of their stakeholders around waste is just as valuable as, the environmental benefits of this type of program. And so we do typically have budgets for tenant engagement at properties, whether it's a ice cream social or, some kind of event. And so as we look at that and look at what ways are successful and engaging, we found this to be a worthwhile effort. I wouldn't say it's a, payback analysis. We invested $1,000. Are we saving $1,000? But it's more about contributing to the strategy and the goal of the property with tenant engagement.
Great, thanks, Jason. And Claire, I see you've unmuted, so you might also be able to weigh in on this.
Yes, I wanted to weigh in. When we're talking about the green chemistry program, of course, we are also talking about hazardous waste and solvent usage. So, part of the decisions are tied to risk management, right? However, cost is also an impact, because when if you can potentially use less hazardous ingredients, less hazardous solvents, then the cost for disposal, the potential risk is liability to the company gets reduced. But an interesting aspect in the green chemistry program and what we do with our waste streams once they're generated, of course, is the risk tolerance of the company as well. And we're seeing that evolve over time, I think, with the added importance of sustainability and sustainable options, that we can come to the legal department, to the risk management organizations, and talk about the sustainability benefits of other waste disposal options, such as potentially reuse, which has been very, not widely accepted, at least in the BMS space.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Claire. The next question we have here, I think, will be a last question we take from the audience, which is, do you conduct waste audits internally, or is it through a contractor hauler? And I believe, Jason, you spoke most about waste audits, if you want to briefly address that.
Yeah, we typically use external contractors. I think look at who's excited about this. If you have stakeholders, tenants, employees, departments that are really keen on this, there may be some willing to contribute or volunteer. I think too, you don't necessarily need a environmental science expert to do a waste analysis. I think your janitorial provider may be able to do this, and honestly, it's really good to have your janitorial team involved, because in our space, a lot of times, if you're in an office building, a janitor, collecting waste bins can be your front line of defense and tell you, yeah, there's a lot of recycling contamination, or people could be putting their soda cans in recycling and they're not. So they may already have an idea, but when we look at re-upping our janitorial contracts, we try to include, some kind of scope there. So, there are experts that do this, and they'll produce a nice report. And the idea is an audit's going to give you a snapshot of the opportunities that you have. It doesn't make sense to do this weekly or monthly always. But if you see, trends improving or issues, coming up, then you can kind of work on the education and engagement piece and make the appropriate changes.
Great, thanks so much, Jason. I understand I might be having a video freezing issue, but I'm still here with you all. Don't worry. I just hope it's a good facial expression if I'm frozen. So to close out here, I actually am going to ask one more question of all of our panelists. If you could just really, really briefly tell me one thing that either you are thinking about for the next year, or something that you think you'll institute in the next year. So I'll look ahead real quick, and anyone who's ready to go can pop on. We'll do it popcorn style.
Okay.
I think I've been quiet for a while. Oh, go ahead.
All right,
Claire.
yeah.
It's first.
Bright, so let's start with you, because Claire kicked us off on all our topics.
Yes, I'm very excited that the Zero Waste Program is something new that we just launched at GM. For next year, my main goal is to develop a methodology to assign reduction targets for each plant, and it's a very interesting and somewhat cumbersome exercise. Plants differ in nature, number of people. So once we complete that portion, we will be much more confident on, strategizing how to implement different waste streams. And I will leave you all with this quote from an anonymous Greek proverb. Society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. So the journey may be hard, but keep doing it. If you have any questions, want to engage offline, you have my contact information. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Breitner. And Claire, now I will kick it over to you.
Okay. In keeping with the theme of Green Labs, I wanted to, in this upcoming year, I'm really hoping to do a deep dive into the laboratory waste streams and I think that there's a lot of new ways and unique ways to segregate the waste streams and find solutions for recycling or reuse of materials. So we are going to be spending a lot of time in our laboratories and also working with our suppliers, our third-party suppliers, to find good solutions for some of the wastes that are currently being generated.
Great, thanks, Claire. Jason, would you like to pop in on this, and then we'll close it out with Elizabeth?
Sure. I guess closing comment or remark would be, first would be just a parting word of advice would be, as you are evaluating your next steps in your waste programs, it kind of goes without saying, but we've found it to be really helpful to listen to your stakeholders, whether it's the people operating your buildings, people in those specific expertise fields that are using consumables, whether it's, again, an office building or a manufacturer building or otherwise. If someone in a recycling team is deciding the program, you may be too far from the actual use case to understand what needs to be done. And I guess parting word of what I'm excited about is, again, just would be, partnering with those that are passionate about this and finding those synergies to be, find mutually beneficial outcomes.
Thanks, Jason. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm really excited to actually implement our signage program that we, spent the year developing. So that's a big one. And I think everybody had some good tips on and finding those who are kind of your champions and really engaging with them. I think that's important in anything you do, and a good place to start if you're, looking at any of these waste reduction goals.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that can speak to the challenge we saw about getting internal buy-in. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much to our speakers. We've just got a couple of conclusion slides here. So if we could hop over to those additional resources slides. Thank you. All the links we talked about today are available here, so you'll see this on the Better Building Solution Center. Speaking of the Solution Center, we have over 3,000 solutions to help you find proven and cost-effective strategies to help you reach your energy, water, and waste reduction goals. So these solutions you can all find on the waste page and tons more on the Better Building Solution Center. We'll go to the next slide, please. This is just a plug for our wonderful Better Buildings Summer webinar series, which will start after Summit. And I do want to, in particular, draw your attention to on August 3rd, we are going to be having a waste-focused session, which will include actually going over the WARM model, which at the very beginning in one of the polls, someone mentioned using that for metrics. So you can tune in on August 3rd for that. And finally, next on our final slide, please. I'd like, again, thank you so much to all of our waste pilot partners, and in particular, the partners that you all stepped up to share so much today about data and engagement and tools and all of those insights. So thank you so much for our attendees. I appreciate you answering all our polls, and you're welcome to engage with all of our speakers, or if you'd like to reach someone on the DOE side of things, please reach out to me and I'm happy to either answer your question or connect you with the right person. So thank you so much, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of Summit.